The Pittsburgh Steelers added to their wide receiver room. Not exactly the move that we thought we would be talking about on May 8th. But it's the move that we got nonetheless. I'm Jarrett Bailey. That's my friend Nick Farabaugh from Steelers Now. What's going on, buddy?
Not much, man. What's going on?
Just you get the I got the Schefter notification. It's like Steelers sign receiver. I'm like, oh, yeah, this could be interesting. And then it's no offense, Scotty Miller. I was like, oh, okay. Well, there's more competition for those 4 and 5 spots on the roster. That's cool, I guess. But it's worth talking about. Obviously, let me pull up the entire list of receivers on the Steelers roster right now. I think Brooke Pryor just tweeted out the entire list just so everybody was aware of it. So the current list is George Pickens, Van Jefferson, Roman Wilson, Calvin Austin, Quez Watkins, Scotty Miller, Marquez Callaway, Des Fitzpatrick, Kalen Harris, Denzel Mims, Deuce Watts. I think you and I are in pretty solid unison in terms of thinking they only keep 5. I think that Pat Freiermuth is basically just going to be a power slot receiver in this offense, mostly similar to what Kyle Pitts was last year. If you look at his snap counts, a lot of them came as a slot receiver. I think we'll see something similar to that. We've seen the Steelers only keep 5 before. I think in 2020 was when they had Eric Ebron. Just your thoughts overall on this move and what it means for the Steelers overall as it currently stands.
I don't know. It follows their model of what they've been doing at the position all offseason, which is get speedy, deep threat guys that can take advantage of Russ's moonball. I think that's something. Quez Watkins can do that. Van Jefferson can do that. Scotty Miller can do that. Denzel Mims can do that. Just all these guys are deep threats. Roman Wilson, too, honestly, is similar to that. Better version, but similar. But trading Deontay Johnson and then not finding a replacement would be a legitimately bad way to go about this. So it seems like right now it's quantity over quality. I'll say this, like the depth chart's going to look better than it did last year because they're going to have more depth down the roster at receiver than they did last year. But they don't have a 2 right now. I think they have, maybe they have a 2 and a 3. Maybe they don't have a 1. Depends on what you kind of think of Pickens.
Yeah.
But he's going to be the 1. And right now, Roman Wilson's going to be the 2. Could he do it? I guess, but I wouldn't want him to, have to be wide receiver 2 good right away. I think it's a dangerous game to play when we're talking about kind of this room, man. So I think they're signing depth guys right now in an attempt to throw a dart and see if one of these guys can reclaim their form from a few years ago. Quez Watkins, Scotty Miller, Marquez Callaway, and Van Jefferson all have seasons where they were productive 3s or 2s. But it hasn't been, last year recent, for example. So I don't know, man. It's like dart throws right now. If you had a legitimate 2 on this team right now, you would feel pretty good about the room.
Right.
Like Van Jefferson as a wide receiver 4, sign me up. I'm with it. He's a good 4. Scotty Miller as a speedy 5 or Calvin Austin as a speedy 5, cool. It works. But they don't have a 2 right now. And that's really what the whole is. They don't have an outside receiver that can consistently win outside of George Pickens, and teams are just going to double Pickens.
And even then, when it comes to Pickens, I've kind of been on this train all offseason. It's like I think Pickens is a very, very good 2, and he's incredible at what they ask him to do, which is, win deep and get yards after the catch on, if they put him in the slot on a slant or a drag or something of that nature. He's not a guy that is going to be a predominant X. Like, you don't look at George Pickens and think of, oh, deep route tree, natural separated. That's what Deontay Johnson was. And you touched on him obviously not being in Pittsburgh anymore. I think that Pickens is more of a Plexico Burress type, where he's a very, very good number 2, but I think that they still need to find a number 1.
Yeah, I think he has to become a sharper route runner to be a 1. I think he did last year. He started to separate a little more, but he's got to become a better separator to become a true 1. He's an alpha dog in the contested catch areas, but I don't think he has truly unlocked 3-level threat yet. I feel like he's a 2-level threat. And what I mean by that is he wins deep, right? or he can win underneath. Like, okay, get him on a drag route. He has the speed to beat an ankle. But he needs to unlock that third gear, which is the full route and winning in the intermediate. So he's a very good 2. You can argue he's a low 1. I think you can make that argument, right? He's a low end 1. I don't think they had a 1 last year necessarily. I just think they had 2 really good number 2s, and it worked quite well, right? You can get by with 2 really good 2s. Like, you don't – not every team's going to have a Devontae Adams, a Tyreek Hill, a Brandon Ayuk. Like, not every team's going to have that. So if it's like Pickens and Cortland Sutton and Roman Wilson, I think you're feeling good about that room, right? Like, it's a fine room. But I think they need that too right now. They need an X receiver or a Z, whatever you want. They just need another outside guy, man, right now. And Pickens has to take that leap too, obviously. If he does take the leap and they don't have someone to complement him, I think it's really going to be, wasted potential because, I mean, there's a very big real possibility next year that Pickens is going to be, first extension guy up. So you're talking about a cost-controlled number 1 for 1 year at least.
Yeah. I'll say this in terms of, if I want to play devil's advocate. We saw a Detroit Lions team last year who made it within a few bad decisions of making it to the Super Bowl without really like a strong, legit outside receiver. Amon-Ra St. Brown is one of the better receivers in football. For about 10 minutes was the highest paid receiver in the NFL before the Eagles trumped that by paying A.J. Brown and Devontae Smith. But their outside targets last year were predominantly Josh Reynolds, who had, a couple games where he, popped off, and Jameson Williams, who didn't really like all of Jameson Williams' big moments I remember were after the catch or, last year in the NFC Championship game, he came on a jet sweep. So they didn't really have a, big name on the outside complimenting Amon-Ra St. Brown, and it worked really well for them. And if you look at what the Steelers have right now, they've got 2 solid running backs. They got a solid tight end room, Roman Wilson and George Pickens. I mean, like, you can make that work theoretically.
Theoretically, you could. I just think the difference there is Reynolds is a big dude that could block his behind off. Like, that's the thing, right? Roman Wilson can kind of act like the intermediate winner that Josh Reynolds is, because that's where he wins. He wins between the numbers on over routes and different things from the slot. But who's going to be the big outside guy when they have to go 11 personnel? Like, people point and say, well, Arthur Smith only ran 18 I think 18% of the time they ran out of 11 personnel in Atlanta last year. That's still like 200 snaps. Like, still a lot of snaps.
Yeah.
And in the AFC, you're probably going to have to do it even more because there's more prolific quarterback play, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, and Russ is more comfortable working out a shotgun. And so, I mean, it's going to happen. I know it was 18% last year. It might be like 30% this year. Like that might be something that happens. So I feel like you need another guy there. So like you could piece it together. I don't know, maybe Van Jefferson, I think he's the best out of the crop that they have right now, personally.
Sure.
Van Jefferson. Like, maybe Van Jefferson finds what he had in 2021, where he was on that Rams team and was a legit 2-3. He was legitimately a 2 for that team with Robert Woods and other guys on that team. But man, that was 3 years ago at this point. Yeah. So can he be that? I mean, he would have emerged there, in Atlanta last year. I feel like if he was, that wasn't a good room in Atlanta last year. It was Mac Hollins, Olamide Zaccheaus, and Scotty Miller was there too, and Van Jefferson, and he didn't emerge past those guys. So,
yeah, you just pointed out. I mean, it was the Steelers now have 2 of those guys from a bad wide receiver room. So let's start talking some names in terms of if they do get a guy, which I think you and I agree that they want to get a guy. On the outside in terms of trading for somebody. Brandon Ayuk reportedly was going to cost the GDP of the city of Pittsburgh, so I think that ship has sailed. Deebo Samuel could possibly be fun, but I don't think they want to take on that contract for a guy that wouldn't fill the need of, a number 1 outside separating receiver. He could work, and I'm sure that they could figure stuff out for him in the offense, but it doesn't fill the need that they have right now. And they called Denver about Cortland Sutton. They were told no. We'll see if anything materializes from that, if that's still a possibility. But Benjamin Albright in a tweet like last week or a week and a half ago said that they called at least a half dozen teams. So that leaves at least 3 other teams that were called, 4 other teams that were called. If San Francisco and Denver were 2 of them, maybe it's a DK Metcalf. Maybe they reached out to Washington about Terry McLaurin. Like what other names can we maybe theoretically piece together here?
I think it was more than just 6. I think it was 8, 9, 10, somewhere around there. I think they called a lot of teams. And they clearly want a guy. I just don't think there's a guy right now. Now, I guess the guy that they could call about right now and probably get would be Treylon Burks. But I think they want to shoot higher than Treylon Burks. I think they want a proven guy that they could trust. So if you're talking about other names that could be thrown in there, I think Darius Slayton's the one that I'm kind of that hasn't been talked about probably enough. Again, we're not talking about even on the level of a Sutton or an Ayuk or a Debo.
That's like that would be like that third tier of guys.
Yeah, he wants a new contract. Too. He's getting $6 a year right now, so you'd have to pay him. But he's a legit too. He's done a lot more than I think most guys would, and he's been the wide receiver 1 for that Giants team. And he's done, he's been very productive for what he's done. Hasn't had good quarterback play during his time there. Pretty underrated route runner. He's a really good fit with Russ. He's a deep ball winner. He's a big dude that runs extremely well. He's got bad hands. I think that would obviously throw people for a loop because he does have bad hands, but he's a pretty underrated route runner. He wins deep. He's fast. He's a good blocker. I feel like he would be a really good kind of 1-2 with Pickens there, and then you would have Wilson. Again, is that like an ideal scenario? No, but if it's better than what they have. Slayton is a legitimately solid football player. And he's a legit, fringe 2-3. Like he's legit on that. So if that trade kind of comes up and you can maybe get Darius Slayton, I think he would be an interesting name. But I think the names that have been speculated are probably going to be the likeliest ones, right? I think it's going to be Sutton. Contract talks go nowhere. Ayuk contract talks break down. Ayuk costs so much money that they need to trade someone in that San Francisco room, right? Like if you want to go full on San Francisco, like Jawan Jennings, I think has to be at least mentioned, because he needs a new contract. He's an RFA right now, hasn't signed his tender. They want to extend him via reports out there, but what if Ayuk, comes in real hot? What if he gets 35 a year? Right, he could because AJ Brown got 32. So how hot is that contract going to be? And would they rather keep him and Debo together rather than say extend Jennings and work Pearsall in there? So it depends on what they kind of want to do there. But he could be a name too. But I really think the names we've talked about, Courtland Sutton, Brandon Ayuk, Debo Samuel, are more likely. I don't get the DK Metcalf one. I understand where it's coming from because Seattle's up against the cap and everything.
It's a weird spot to me right now where they've got a new head coach in Mike McDonald. They've moved on from multiple veterans. They're in that weird ground, both as a franchise and as a quarterback, where like they're good enough to be not bad, but they're not good enough to be great. Like that, which is
but the worst place you want to be. Debo is in a unique position because not Debo. DK is in a unique position because he's not even 27 yet. So if you were going to trade a receiver, you would trade Tyler Lockett. And they restructured his contract, so they're keeping Tyler Lockett. So like, if you were going to trade a receiver there, you would trade Tyler Lockett because DK. Okay, say your mini rebuild in Seattle takes 2 or 3 years. DK's still only going to be 29, 30. I mean, he could be part of your next winning team. So, I don't really understand that unless DK, there's some like underlying issues there, which we don't know about yet. But I don't really get at that one. I still think the likeliest is Courtland Sutton. I just do. The logic takes me there. He's been a guy they've shopped for years. Like last year they were.
I think Baltimore reached out to them last year about Sutton, and they said no.
Yeah, right. So there's been trade rumors for years around this guy. And if they don't want to pay him and he starts holding out in the training camp, I think that's where this becomes tenuous, where you can maybe get Courtland Sutton off their hands. I do think that's the likeliest, but we talked about them wanting a receiver. I think the plan, once they, traded Deontay, I think the plan was probably to sign Mike Williams. I'm guessing that's what they initially thought they were going to be able to do. Then he signed with the Jets, and they didn't really have a backup plan on the free agency market.
Right.
I'm sure they called about Stephon Diggs. I'm assuming if you call about all these other guys, I'm sure that they probably called about him. Maybe didn't like the price that it was. We already have heard from Mike Silver of the San Francisco Chronicle they didn't want to pay what the 49ers wanted for Debo.
Right. So you can only imagine what they wanted for Ayuk.
Yeah, so I'm assuming they didn't want to pay what they wanted for Ayuk. So Steelers are trying to find a cost-effective kind of player here, but I don't think they're going to find one. I think they're going to have to pony up a significant draft pick if they're going to want someone, or they could settle for a guy maybe like a Slayton or a Burks. I mean, that's really their options. Either they're going to have to pay a significant draft pick, or they're going to trade for Traylon Burks. Like, that's probably what it is, right?
You mentioned Darius Slayton last year, just so everybody has at least, somewhat of a look at what Slayton is. 50 catches, 770 yards, 4 touchdowns. That's legitimate, number 2 production, number 3 production that they could work with, should that be the case. Another name that I threw out, and I've been throwing out, Chris Godwin makes sense to me now with Tampa Bay because they have 4 legit guys there now with Mike Evans. They have Trey Palmer, who looked well as a rookie. And they just drafted one of the Washington kids. Was it McMillan, the one that they drafted out of Washington? Mm-hmm. So they've got 3 dudes there right now that could be legitimate. Chris Godwin's obviously another one of those guys where I think that he would be kind of above the Sutton tier, not quite to the Ayuk tier. He'd be somewhere in between. I think Chris Godwin will be a tremendous addition should they go that route. Again, no speculation has been made of that. This is just me kind of throwing it out there. But I mean, if there's a name that sneaks up on you and ends up being acquired, I'd be totally cool if it was Chris Godwin.
Yeah, I mean, he makes sense, right? From the Steelers' point of view. I'm still not sure it makes sense from the Bucks' point of view because I think, you pay Baker, you're in a win now mode. So my guess is that's not going to be a tenable situation. I mean, you could throw out crazy names. You can look all around the league. Devontae Adams was thrown around even when the significant playmaker report came out. There's a lot of names you can throw around. It seems like right now that their best options are not going to be in that top tier unless they're going to really pay up. I mean, if the Ayuk contract negotiations just completely fall apart and he's not going to be back in San Francisco, even if that does happen, actually, why would San Francisco trade him? Wouldn't they?
That's the thing. I think that they are really gearing up to run it back one last time with this core group of guys and say, look, this is the last chance we're going to have with having Ayuk, Debo, Christian McCaffrey, all the guys on defense. This is our last opportunity to win a Super Bowl with this group of guys. That's why I said, if there was a trade that was going to happen for those two, it would have happened over draft weekend. I don't think that the 49ers are moving any of them for picks next year. I think they're going to go balls to the wall this year and try to get a Super Bowl with this group of guys before, that time runs out.
Yeah, it would. I mean, if you want to win a Super Bowl, the benefit for what you would do is just to play with Ayuk and then let him walk.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really what you want to do. Take the 3rd round compensatory pick and just call it a day, right? Obviously you would value that championship over a 1st round pick.
Absolutely.
So that's really where that stands. I think Sutton makes more sense because he's older. Mm-hmm. And so, Cortland Sutton, for example, the Broncos ain't winning this year, man.
Absolutely not.
They're not winning this year. Now, they probably want to surround Bo Nix with an environment that they can evaluate him in and where he can grow. And I can imagine why Sutton would help that. But listen, if they don't want to pay Cortland Sutton, he's going to be 29, or he is 29. He's going to be 30. If they want to trade him, that's possible. I could see that happening. Another name I've seen thrown around, it's just a name I've seen thrown around, is Brandon Cooks. He just got traded to Dallas. I mean, it would be a good trade.
He's been traded 9 times. It wouldn't be anything new with Brandon Cooks. I'd be okay with Brandon Cooks.
I mean, Brandon Cooks would be a good trade, but again, all of these ones that we are talking about have some catch to them.
Sure.
Why would the Giants trade Darius Slayton when they just drafted Malik Neighbors? I guess the reason they would is because Wan'Dale Robinson and Jalen Hyatt are going take over more snaps, but Slayton has outplayed him, so they ain't taking over his snaps. So, the plan was to usurp Darius Slayton, and then Darius Slayton leveled up his game. So credit to him. Same thing with the Cortland Sutton stuff. Probably want to keep him around for Bo Nix. Maybe he's like a trade deadline guy that they just move.
Maybe
that could be something. I would bet the Steelers don't want to wait that long, though. I'm sure that
Mm-hmm.
they would like to go into the season with someone. So again, I mean, the only obvious player that is like on the trade market right now that I think you could call about and legitimately get right now, right here on May, is Traylon Burks. And sure, he's interesting. The former first-round pick pedigree upside argument, but if you want a proven two, he's not a proven two.
No, absolutely not. And we could keep throwing around names. I'm sure we're gonna, but like I saw somebody say like John Mechie. I'm like, I don't think that.
I like the Mechie Burks upside trade.
Yeah,
it's a trade that you could make. It's just those guys aren't proven to be upgrades. So Roman Wilson would still be your two. Okay, like Burks and Mechie would come in and probably be the three, but would they be your two?
I mean, and by the way, I think both of those guys would be upgrades over what they have right now. Like if Roman Wilson has to be the two, okay. Even if it's like a 2A, 2B situation where, Traylon Burks plays better than expected, or if they get Mechie, he plays better than expected and, elevates his game. But obviously there's bigger fish that they want to fry. It's just a matter of, okay, are you willing to, if you want these people, then you're going to have to give up what it's going to take to get them. Like you are what you invested. And if you're not willing to cough up what it's going to take to get these guys, then you're just kind of crap out of luck.
I do wonder what their plan is if this trade stuff never materializes. Like there's no guarantee that a team's ever going to want to trade a good receiver. I mean, there's not.
Sure.
They're kind of banking on it, right? So what is the backup plan? Is it like, would they sign someone? The free agent market, I'm not even like
really left.
Okay. I don't even think like some of the guys that came off the board over the past week are great. OBJ, no. Chark, Gallup, but they're better than what they have. Like what? Okay, Zay Jones. Again, I have problems with Zay Jones's game. He's better than what they have.
Yeah.
You have at some point you have to have a fallback option. I don't know who that is. What is it, Michael Thomas? Like,
oh Lord, help us if it's Michael Thomas.
Like what? I mean, he's the second best receiver left on the market.
I'm gonna pull the free agents right now.
I mean, Russell Gage. If you want to keep going,
hey, another Falcon, you might as well. You already have half of the 2020.
Right. Russell Gage is out there. Zay Jones is still on the market. He just took his third visit.
Yeah, I was gonna say he hasn't had a visit with the Steelers yet. He's on his third one. I think Alan pointed it out on Twitter. It's like, yeah, that ship that might have sailed if he hasn't had any sort of conversations with Pittsburgh yet. So that's
Martavis Bryant is back on the market. If you want to go,
I mean, that'd be a fun story, but I don't think anybody would be having any hopes of 20. When the hell 2015?
MVS is a free agent.
MVS, I mean, isn't good. That's my issue.
Right. Again, all these guys have problems, right?
Sure. And if you look at somebody like a Hunter Renfrow, that'd be cool, but they already have too many slot guys where it just wouldn't make sense.
Too many slots.
Yeah, you got Jamal Agnew, Mecole Hardman, Jakeem Grant, Randall Cobb, Marquise Goodwin, Sterling Shepard. I don't know, man.
It's not good, right? I mean, again, look at those names for what the Steelers want. So you could throw out guys like Renfrow.
Yeah.
And Michael Thomas is the second best name?
Probably.
Right? What, Zay Jones and then him?
I would take Zay Jones over Michael Thomas, right. Yeah. But yeah, he's probably the second best.
Would you take Michael Thomas over MVS?
Yes. MVS last year with the Chiefs was good for 2 deep shots a game, or he wasn't catching a ball.
Exactly. So it's not good, right? But at some point, man, you can't. I just have a hard time going into the season with Van Jefferson as a wide receiver 3.
I can agree with that very much so. We got a few comments here on the YouTube. Marquez Valdez-Scantling, for anybody who missed on the MVS acronym. Yeah, Marquez Valdez-Scantling started his career in Green Bay, was in Kansas City last year. He's very much a one-trick pony. He was their wide receiver, 2 last year on the outside, who very rarely made any sort of plays. He's not very good.
Basically the same type of guy that they have on the roster right now. Just, I mean, dude, Quez Watkins is a speed that plays outside. They have it on the roster already.
Exactly. Pearl Jam says they signed another wide receiver for. Yeah, basically, it's going to be a hell of a competition now. And I think you and I touched on this before. I've talked about it on this show a ton. I think that a lot of Steelers fans are much higher on Calvin Austin than the Steelers seem to be on Calvin Austin. I don't think it's a guarantee he makes the roster.
I don't either, but I also think he's better than a lot of the guys they signed.
Sure.
So,
I think these are a lot of like Calvin Austin, show us that you're better than them, please, in camp type signings.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, I don't know. I guess when you're hosting a competition between Calvin Austin, Quez Watkins, and Scotty Miller, it's who has the one strength that they can trust the most.
Yeah.
And I mean, if you're really going in that direction, Watkins is the one that has inside-outside versatility. I don't even think Quez Watkins is that good, but
I don't either.
But like in terms of versatility and a guy that you could throw one or two deep balls to a game, he has that. Although Calvin Austin might be the best pure deep threat of them, so I guess we'll see. And his punt return on his side too.
Correct.
So I guess we'll kind of see with that. You know, a lot of these special teams stuff too. Like, there's not a lot of special teams capabilities on coverage units among these guys either. So
that's why, like, I think Marquez Callaway could be a name to pay attention to because you might be able to utilize him on special teams coverage. And he might be a name threat.
He might be a name there, but you know, the Watkins, Jefferson, Miller, Austin are returners if they are at all special teamers.
Yeah. What do you make of the Denzel Mims signing? Former second-round pick of the Jets, never really took off. Granted, the Jets have just been a tire fire since they got him. I don't know, man. Like, they're taking a lot of flyers.
Dart throw. I mean, that's what it is. It's dart throw, right? All these are dart throws. Like, again, they're all guys that have had seasons. Like, Quez Watkins has had a productive season before. Van Jefferson's had a productive season before. Scotty Miller had 500 yards in the year that the Buccaneers won the Super Bowl.
Like, won the Super Bowl.
Like, they have had years before, and they're hoping one of these guys can, like, magic in the bottle, just spike it back up. But it's tough. It's tough, and you better hope Roman Wilson's ready to play if they can't add someone. Like, if he's not, if one of them, even if Roman Wilson is good, if George Pickens or Roman Wilson gets hurt, then
you're going to be really relying on, like, sure, like, you're quote unquote deep, but like it's a bunch of like 5s and 6s that you have that you're expecting to elevate and be number 2s, and that's just it's not good. The tight end room. What are we looking at in terms of ratios of wide receivers to tight ends? We touched on it a little bit already. I think that 5 receivers, 4 tight ends is probably the move.
Probably. I expect them to keep, I think Muth, Washington, and Hayward are borderline locks.
Can you talk me into Connor Hayward? Because I don't get it.
He's a lock for special teams alone. 100%. He's one of their best special teamers. So he's going to make the team. Will he play a lot of tight end? I guess we'll see, but they've had so much overturn on the special teams units. He's one of their best players. He's going to be great with the new kickoff rules too. He'll be a stud on that unit. So he'll make it. Pruitt is there, I'm assuming, for blocking tight end depth. Maybe Hot Rod can get in there too. That's, like, I guess the one scenario where Connor Hayward could get cut is if he is like the 5th best tight end very clearly, and Rodney Williams can do a lot of special teams stuff too.
You were a big Rodney Williams guy last year in camp, I recall. You were big on Rodney Williams.
I think he's like an interesting player. I just think he was so raw coming out. So he's like a vertical threat tight end that got way better at blocking. He belongs on a 53-man NFL roster. I do believe that. So I'm interested to see kind of how he comes out this year too. I mean, I can't even discount the fact that they might keep 4 running backs. I think that's a possibility. Like, I don't know. So I think we're assuming 3 quarterbacks and 9 linemen. If we're assuming that they kept 24, I believe, last year on offense, bump that up 1, and you could probably get 4 running backs, 4 tight ends, and 5 receivers. Like, I don't think it's crazy that Edwards from Georgia ends up being a really nice player for them.
Yeah, 13 touchdowns last year with Georgia. I think that he's a name that, pay attention to in camp and preseason for sure.
Yeah, I think Dejon Edwards is someone to pay attention to. And they run the ball so much as possible. They keep four backs. So we'll kind of see how that goes. But right now, I would guess 4 tight ends, 5 receivers in terms of that construction.
Yeah, I think that, again, you look at how Smith utilized Kyle Pitts last year as more of a receiver than, a hand in the dirt tight end. I think we'll see Freiermuth do more of that stuff, considering that's more of his strength.
It's so interesting to me that on the least used 11 personnel in the NFL was Arthur Smith last year, and the most was Sean McVay. They're the same branch. I keep saying this. Arthur Smith runs what Sean McVay ran in 2019 and just never changed it. Like, that's what it was.
And Atlanta last year, I mean, I wrote about this, like, they ran a ton of 12 personnel stuff. We hardly saw that from Pittsburgh last year. Like, especially like in early downs, we like Atlanta wasn't afraid to go 22 on a lot of like first and second down situations. I don't think the Steelers ran a single play out of 22 last year. Like, it's going to be a lot of different schematic changes. It'll be a lot of, but I think you were the one who asked Arthur Smith about the offense and, potentially getting stale with, how did you word it? I'll let you, go verbatim.
Like, was he going to evolve it? Because again, I think he's run virtually, I mean, there's obviously new plays in there, but he's run the same offense from the time he was the OC at Tennessee to now. I mean, it has not changed significantly. He runs a ton of mid zone and wide zone still, the tight end heavy approach. Meanwhile, he learned this from LaFleur, obviously, because LaFleur was there. Like, he's a McVay branch guy, but while LaFleur and Shanahan and McVay have evolved, Arthur Smith has not. So are you going to use more gap stuff, which is something that the obvious anyone can tell you McVay and Shanahan and LaFleur all have embraced in recent years. They have the line to do it. Obviously, the Steelers could have the best polling line in football if they want to use that. Are you going to go, more 3 wide receivers? I don't. Maybe. Listen, Wilson's a slot first. I mean, he played slot 70% of the time. The last time Arthur Smith had a slot like Roman Wilson, Khalif Raymond maybe, but different player, right?
Yeah, very much.
He really hasn't had a Roman Wilson before. He's just a different player. So is like the Roman Wilson interest signaling that he wants to go more in a direction that features more receiver usage or spread formations as possible? I think if he can change a little bit, it can work. But if he wants to go more with 3 receivers or on the field, whatever, brother, they need a third receiver. So I understand why they traded Deontay Johnson. He didn't really fit what they wanted, but I think their plan blew up in their faces when Mike Williams signed with the Jets, and then they thought there would be a trade market potentially for someone, and it was too expensive for them, and there really isn't actually a robust trade market right now. So, again, at some point, I think my thing is Omar has been so good at being patient and kind of understanding what teams are thinking. So maybe he knows something's coming here, and he's so well connected on the agent side of it. So maybe he knows, one of these contract situations is going to go south and they're going to be able to trade for someone. But I also think he has sometimes borderlined on insanity for how patient he has been. So it hasn't blown up in his face yet. Like, his patience in the Justin Fields saga actually was
otherworldly. Yeah.
Right? His draft patience. He didn't move up for Fautano, didn't move up for Frazier. Roman Wilson fell right to him. Same story last year. These guys fell right to him. But is there going to be someone that's actually there for him to upgrade wide receiver? He wants to. Did you hear the man in the post-draft presser where he basically said that they were going to that they want to trade for receiver? I mean, they want to. It's just going to be if there's a guy actually open right now that they value as a wide receiver too.
I think in some ways the trade market so far could have even worked against them a little bit because, you saw Jerry Jeudy go for a day 3 or a pair of day 3s. The Steelers could have done that. Like Jerry Jeudy isn't, a superstar, but he would be a hell of a lot better than what they have right now, opposite of Pickens. If you look at we talked about the Stephon Diggs trade, would you be willing to give up a 20-25 second for Stephon Diggs at this juncture? I could see why you wouldn't. But I think that, the names that were on the trade market receiver wise were already gone. And then when you deal Deontay and your fallback plan falls through, you're kind of left in a bad spot. I think you're right though. I think the Sutton name is something that they'll continue to be patient with. Because if the Broncos aren't willing to give him a new deal, I think that, we'll have to see and everything if he's, going to hold in, hold out, whatever it may be. That could be a training camp deal that gets done, which would be exciting for you and I.
Yeah, I agree with that. And listen, like I have concerns with the Sutton fit too. I don't think it's perfect. I think he's pretty similar to George Pickens in a lot of ways.
But, yeah, in some ways it would be a little bit redundant. But
it would be a fine room. I think, I'm not saying George Pickens, Courtland Sutton, and Roman Wilson is an elite group, but it is good enough. Is it probably still a downgrade from last year in terms of the top 2? Maybe. It depends on what George Pickens becomes. But it's a good enough room. You could win with that. So that's really the weakest point on this team right now. The slot corner position, I'm assuming, is just going to get fixed.
I think that's either going to be they just bring back Cam Sutton, or I mean, legitimately right now, I think Beanie Bishop would start week 1.
You're probably right. I mean, you are probably right. So I really, I look at this team and really do kind of think that receiver room needs one more guy. It's just going to be if they come available.
Yeah. Adam is asking if we think that Treylon Burks is a legit option at number 2.
I don't. But I guess say you're sitting there in August and nothing has materialized with that group we talked about. Would you rather not have the upside swing with Burks or not? I guess is the question. Because what would Burks cost? What, a conditional 7th maybe?
You got 2 7th-round picks next year from the Eagles. Send one of those to Tennessee for Treylon Burks.
Yeah, that's a last resort thing. Like I don't think Treylon Burks is a very attractive option for them right now. But I do think he fits what they've done a lot this offseason with the pedigree, the upside. It makes sense from that. But is he a 2? No. Again, if they acquire Burks, he's probably their 3 or their 4. It probably would be him or Van Jefferson, and then you would have Roman Wilson as your 2. But when you go 11 personnel, I think you could at least throw Burks outside. I think that's really what it is. Like he would just be an umbrella, so you don't have to force Roman Wilson to become this all-encompassing guy year 1.
Right. And again, that's a move like if they made it, it is based off of, okay, this guy has a lot of upside. We can see at least what's here during training camp. If we don't like it, we didn't trade anything to get him. It's not going to cost us a ton of money if we don't. Worst case scenario, I mean, he's better than the current 4 or 5 that you have. And, you're not going to have to pay him a ton. I don't think it would be a bad option if they acquired him for next to nothing and just at least saw what they had.
Yeah, I think that's really where you come down to. If you have to take an upside swing at some point, you have to take an upside swing.
Right.
And maybe someone gets cut that you don't expect to get cut when, the roster.
Yeah, we see that every year. Every year.
Maybe there's someone that actually fits in as that 2 guy that you can kind of look at as the fallback option. But no, I mean, would I call Tennessee right now and trade for Treylon Burks? No. Would I, if the market doesn't dictate it, by August, and clearly that I don't have this guy anymore that I wanted as 2, I probably would at that point.
Will be interesting to find out. Nick Farbaugh, Steelers now. What do you got coming on the beat this week? What's new?
Well, we'll be down at the South Side in 2 days.
For got mini
camp. So that'll start up. I'm interested to see some of the rookies, talk to them, all that. Of course, the start of like this it's starting, football's starting to come back. Like
Yes.
that rookie minicamp's like the first part of that. So that's what's coming up on the docket, and then we got OTAs shortly thereafter, man. So it's coming soon. It's coming soon.
Yeah, no, very much looking forward to it. If you're not already, subscribe to the channel, do all that YouTube stuff. We'll be back at the normal time of 7:30 tomorrow. Tune in later on today. Me and JP Acosta on the Pump Fake. Appreciate everybody for tuning in. See you tomorrow for more Black and Gold Breakdown.